I'm really thrilled to sit down with Steve Cassingham, who's the very visionary founder and chief exec of Sustainable Goat, which has become a real pioneering force, challenging traditional narratives and bridging the gap through story-driven content. It's all about the sustainability space, which is a real personal passion of mine. Can you start off by sharing your vision and really what inspired you to found Sustainable Goat in the first place?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of timing, it was so interesting because, I mean, I think the pandemic offered a really great opportunity for people to kind of evaluate what they viewed as important, what they wanted to change in life. And, you know, I think this topic of sustainability has always been a really challenging one because you almost feel this certain level of guilt almost in all the discussion. It's like the end of the world, it's going to be this, it's going to be that. And I'm like, that doesn't really encourage change because we want to have the free choice to make a change. And so where our perspective of GOAT was let's talk to the people who are innovating what the future can look like, who are innovating the new technologies, who are pushing the boundaries of what's possible, and showing that they're just like every one of us. Like we're just normal people trying to do something in the world. And I think that relatability and that human perspective and to do it through story, it actually gives people that option where you're just supporting somebody doing something cool. It's not because you feel like you have to, because in order to make long change, behavior change comes from a choice. And that's where we kind of rooted everything.
I think you're absolutely right. I think for some, it's a very distant concept. For me, I genuinely get anxiety nightmares about the environment. I think quite a lot of us do. Can you talk to me a little bit about what your mission is and what you're trying to achieve in the work that you're doing?
Yeah, so we're built as a media company to basically take the audio, visual, and the written component of how people interact with media and give them a different look in the eye of all the people that are doing it. And so the kind of perspective that we take is, it's funny, we talk about this actually quite a bit, is what actually is sustainability? Because it's a word and we all hear it, but nobody actually really knows what it is. And we ask a lot of people on the podcast that we run, you know, if you take something that's shipped halfway around the world made out of sustainable materials, or buy something locally out of non-sustainable materials, which one's more sustainable? Mm-hmm. And there isn't really an answer to that. And a lot of the questions we ask, well, I actually don't know. And that's the important thing to investigate. And so we started to look at the problem of sustainability and like flip it on its head. How can we think about it as conceptually, how can we solve problems rather than this one specific problem? And so we rooted everything in intentionality, circularity, and community. And we believe that using those three words in that approach, you can solve literally anything, and sustainability being one of them.
Got you.
Yeah.
It is fascinating because I personally have had the similar dilemma. You know, running an event as sustainably as possible is always a challenge.
Yeah.
Why is what you're doing so engaging for audiences, and how does it alleviate that sort of sense of distance or anxiety, or it's just too much for me to deal with? What is it around your messaging that's helping?
I think a lot of it's just approachability. It's not this, I don't know, this thought that you have to do something. Mm-hmm. You know, if I were to tell you tomorrow, you got to go, I don't know, put solar panels on your roof or use less water or anything, any one of those suggestions that most people say, you don't have to do that, really, realistically. And we're not saying anybody should do anything. We're just offering, hey, here are some people doing something, but we're also vetting that process because I'm sure most people have experienced this where you kind of think you're doing the right thing and then you find out a little bit later that, oh, wait, but where does that product actually go at the end of life and how does that work? And then you're kind of like, well, I made kind of a more expensive choice in a lot of cases. And so we try and provide that full picture of like, really what is it? And that's part of that circularity side. It's the products that we either invest in, that we use every single day. And we're not trying to say don't consume. What we're trying to say is consume a little bit more intentionally, because if you just take a little bit of time and step back and think about it just a little bit, it might actually show that there's a little bit more going on behind the curtain. And the more that we can do that for everybody, the more we just allow people to make a decision that they feel is great.
Yeah.
And we're not always going to be right. And that's the key to it. I think we always expect perfection out of this, or that it's a switch that you're just like, oh, be sustainable tomorrow. The bigger the ship, the harder it is to turn in that case. And so it's this idea, can we be patient about the process, and can we do it in such a way where, you know, we're going to make progress, but knowing that it's going to take a little bit of time.
Yeah. I'm a big fan of the just start by starting.
Yeah.
Like just
it's huge.
Do something.
Huge.
Can you give me an example of where a piece of content that's really resonated and has affected the change that you're talking about?
Yeah. So one of the really cool brands is a company called Checkerspot. And what's so interesting is when you think about oil is obviously this huge topic. It's let's stop using fossil fuels, stop using oil. Well, in reality, this used it, that used it. The shoes that you're probably wearing walking down the street use it. The car you got here used it. You can't just depart from that, but what's that raw material? And oil, at the end of the day, is just fossilized algae. And so what this company Checkerspot does, they literally make tailored chemistry with algae to use in products. And so one of their first go-to-market products was an alpine ski that performs just at the high level of the best top skiers in the world, using an algal core on the inside so they don't need to use as much adhesive, locally sourced aspen, but at the root of it, the product performs just as well, if not better, than what's currently on the market. And I think that's a lot of it is we'll make the sustainable choice, and then we're like, well, that didn't last nearly as long. And you're like, well, did that actually solve the problem? And most of the time it doesn't. So they're doing crazy cool things.
And how did you tell that story then?
Yeah, so,
I mean, that sounds brilliant, but how did you bring that to life?
Yeah, we have a streaming series coming out with Reach TV, and part of that series was really documenting it, just being there. And we keep a really small footprint as a team because we want it to be the real story. And so we don't bring huge production crews and all this stuff because then it fundamentally changes oftentimes how people are and how they act. And so we just wanted to capture what it was. And so we got to go to all the factory and see how they actually make the product. And don't get me wrong, they're in an old warehouse that probably has a lot of energy usage and stuff like that. And so they're making that progress. But the coolest part is that we got to share that story and really tell it. And so we're excited to get this streaming series out there because it shows that human element of how they were thinking about the problem and how they were solving the problem, but also what the future can hold. I mean, everything from hydrophobic spray on a Patagonia jacket that isn't using plastic. Yeah. So yeah, so many cool brands.
So you touched on the misconceptions, just whack a solar panel on your roof and you're done. How do you actively challenge those misconceptions about the sustainability initiatives? That you could talk to me about that.
I think it's a willingness to try. I think we try a lot of things and we know that we're going to fail. I mean, the automotive vehicle, it's been decades and decades and decades of iteration. And a lot of people, might think the answer is EV. But we believe that EV is one of the solutions. It's not necessarily the silver bullet, because there really isn't a silver bullet because there's no crystal ball. We talk about this a lot, that plastic actually is a great thing. We just never thought about the end life of it. So we didn't think circularly about the process, but it actually enabled food to get to communities that the food would spoil by the time it gets there. It actually provided real life solutions at a cheaper, more effective way. But we just didn't know how to process the waste from it. And so as we start to think about these solutions, we think about the misconceptions as being, well, let's think about, rather than let's go down this path, and this is going to be the solution, let's get buy-in, let's do this. Let's consider the whole problem, maybe put it all on the table and fail a few times. Because it's okay to fail. And this is not going to be a perfect process, but progress is so much more important than perfection.
Yeah. We're obviously in a space full of lots of brands and marketers. Mm-hmm. Those with a real environmentally conscious vision or product sometimes do fail to, or really struggle to engage with audiences, certainly at scale. Mm-hmm. Could you talk to me a little bit about how you help brands create those messages and reach those audiences that they need in order to thrive?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, they integrate with our platform, meaning on the podcast, streaming, film, and the different ways that people consume media is just one of the ways. But what I would say for brands, just as guidance, whether we work with them or not, is just be honest. I think people think they have to put on a facade and all this, and the reality is society sees it. They can see that you're kind of hiding something or you're kind of lying, and just be honest, and most people are accepting. If you're like, hey, look, we know we're doing some stuff that we're trying to improve, but if we were to close this shop tomorrow, there's a lot of people that won't be able to feed their families. There's a lot of, this business might not survive. And so for us, we just always encourage people to be transparent and be honest, because I think transparency is one of the huge things in this industry, is if you can document the process and show the points where you are making improvements and have it not be perfect, that's going to speak to a community and a customer base and partners and advertisers. It's going to talk to all of them in so much more of a better light, because immediately people go, well, yeah, I'm not perfect either.
So you don't have a hard line, like if you haven't filled these set of criteria, we're not going to work with you. You're much more, sounds like you're much more involved and engaged in persuading people. I don't know, is that?
Yeah, you can put it that way. Because I mean, I think if someone's genuine about their shift and their change, who are we to say you're not allowed to? But I think using that lens of intentionality, circularity, and community is kind of our vetting process. So it's, how do we show through those lenses, are you intentional about the change? Are you thinking a little bit more circular about what you're doing? And are you thinking about the community that it impacts? And if you're doing that, well, you don't have to be perfect, but we'll get there.
Got you. Can you talk to me a little bit about some of the trends that you're seeing in this space? Because it's such a fast-moving world, isn't it? And what can we see, a year from now, 2 years from now?
I think one of the really exciting areas, just sustainability right now, almost every single topic on the planet can be tied to it, which is so cool. And it's really exciting because it's everywhere.
Also terrifying. Because
oh my God.
Like, where do you start? Yes.
Well, and I think the more exciting part for us is we've done everything from food to energy to, I mean, the actual technology going through there, mushrooms. I mean, we've hit all these different topics. One of the major ones, I think, is food and energy. And I think we genuinely have a massive energy problem that nobody sees coming yet. And one of the interesting podcasts that we just recorded and we're about to do a streaming series episode on is actually nuclear energy, which is so interesting because a lot of people are going, solar this, wind farms, and those are all solutions again. But 20% of our nation's energy every single day actually comes from nuclear, and it's not unsafe. I think there's a stigma that kind of always comes with it of explosions and waste and all the stuff that goes with it. But in reality, there's actually benefits to recycling the nuclear waste that we have, and we have 95,000 tons of it right now. And that can actually power the world. And it doesn't actually take a significant lift on our end. It takes some innovation. It takes some chances and trying to go after it. But you can bring out 14 different isotopes that can actually help so many different industries. And so for us, energy has been a huge focus because to get energy, you can solve so many problems. It's water, it's food, and it's the ability for people to connect globally, because I think that's also the huge thing. A lot of people they don't feel like they can make a change because they're like, well, I can't reach halfway across the world and make an impact, so why would I even try? And it's like, well, actually, if everybody's collectively doing a little bit in their own community, it will eventually reach there, but how do we keep that global conversation going? And energy is going to be a huge role in that.
I agree. Nuclear seems like one of the only options to make the significant change at the rate that we really need to. But that could become outrageous.
Totally.
All right, no, go get off topic. One. So, what are you most proud of? Where do you think you've really made significant impact in this journey so far with sustainable?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing we've done is we've opened up a curiosity with people. It's the ability to start to question and just ask why or how does something work. I often say that my curiosity I want to figure out how the world works. And when you start looking at how the world works, you just want to ask more questions. And that curiosity, that's actually the exciting part. Because when we bring all these solutions to market, we say, hey, here's a company doing this, here's a company doing that. It kind of goes, wow, well, what else are people doing? And that excitement, we want people to want to work for those companies. We want people to and we want companies to be able to attract talent that want to work at these companies because they believe in the goal, the mission, and all that comes down to the transparency and the willingness to actually try.
I couldn't agree more. So it was make a very interesting conversation. But tell me about your long-term vision for Sustainable Goat, as we're going to have to wrap up now.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, long-term goal is really to build a media company it brings in the community. I mean, just because we vet people by community doesn't mean that community to us is more important too. We want people to join the conversation. We want people to be part of shaping and hearing what they want to learn more about. Because we'll go out and find it, and we'll go out and vet it, and you can trust the companies that we work with because we go really deep on them. We say no to a lot of companies because we find stuff on them.
Yeah.
And we're like, well, we want to cover the people that are trusted and right. And so we want people to join the community and be part of it.
One message for this group before we go?
Be curious, honestly. Be curious, ask questions, and you can have an impact as much as you feel like you can't. Every single person can have an impact, and it's just the willingness to do it.
I couldn't agree more, and what a great note to end on. Thank you so much, and thank you everyone.